Hello and welcome to FPL Mate, your best mate for Fantasy Premier League content for the 2020-21 season. My name is Dan and today I'm going to be sharing with you a few very basic tips, guidelines, rules you can follow to guarantee yourself to have a pretty good season. I think just by following these basic rules, you can really sort of guarantee that you'll finish above in the overall rankings in your mini leagues, above the vast majority of players, just by following this. There's just really simple rules that you can follow, really easy to understand. You don't really need to do too much research, just bear these kind of things in mind. If you're completely new to the game, this might be incredibly useful. If you've been playing for a couple of years, I think you will get a lot out of this video still. Perhaps if you're more of an advanced player, you have been playing for a fair few years, you know what you're doing, there is a good chance that one or two of these tips might still be relevant to you, but I'm not going to be going into too detailed in terms of strategy and real advanced tactics. But yeah, some very basic rules that I think anyone can follow and can do really well with their seasons just by doing this. So we're going to go through, basically, I'm going to take you through building your team, making transfers and using your chips. The three kind of big things to do in FPL, if you like. So just bear with me, follow through, and yeah, I'm really going to hopefully help you. And if you are interested in further tips, further tactics and things like that, my channel is full of Fantasy Premier League videos that can really help you improve your game. So do stick around, do subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. But without further ado, let's go into the tips. So we're going to start off with your team selection tips, your beginner team selection tips. So the first tip I would say is don't spend too much on goalkeepers. Players like Alisson and Edison are not worth it. You might think, well, Liverpool are going to keep plenty of clean sheets, so let's go for Liverpool's goalkeeper. But the Liverpool goalkeeper, the Manchester City goalkeeper, even going for a Manchester United goalkeeper, they're really expensive players. And because they're playing for a strong team, they don't have their opposition shoot as much against them. So a team who is slightly lower down the table might actually receive a lot of shots, and every time your goalkeeper makes a save, they're going to be picking up more points. So by the end of the season, you will always find that the most expensive premium goalkeepers, Alissons, Edisons, De Gea's, they will never be top of the scoring leaderboard for goalkeepers. So they're just not worth the money whatsoever. So I really would completely just avoid going for these goalkeepers. They're not worth it. You don't really need to spend too much on a goalkeeper to get a good score from a goalkeeper. So save your money, go invest in other positions. Moving on into defence, and I guess the most blanket overall tip I can give to you for picking defenders is to go for attacking wing backs. So your centre backs are never going to pick up as many points as full backs in general. So left backs and right backs. Think of players like Trent Alexander-Arnold and Matt Doherty. They really get really far up the field, and they get contributions. They got goals. They get assists, and that's in addition to their clean sheet. So try to avoid going all out on centre backs and look at some full backs that you can pick. Maybe even from the weaker teams, whatever. Just try and go more for fullbacks than you do for centre-backs. Next up, and this is a big one, and people make this mistake all the time when they first start playing Fantasy Premier League. And if you look in the stats and how many people own these players, it's crazy. But please avoid defensive midfielders. So players like N'Golo Kante, Declan Rice, Nemanja Matic, and Ndidi as well at Leicester. These are quality players in real life, but in fantasy, they don't score any points whatsoever. They are never worth the money you pay for them. They will pick you up 1 or 2 points every single game and get nothing more than that. What we really want is a player who's going to be getting up the pitch and getting goals and getting assists. This is what we're looking for. So in that sense, even central midfielders, just plain old central midfielders, think like a Jordan Henderson or a Lundstram, a Moutinho, even someone like Pogba, they don't actually get that many assists and goals because they're not playing in the real far reaches of the pitch. So generally speaking, what we want to do is go for wingers. Wingers are really good. Wingers play really far up the pitch, which means they're always involved in the goals. And attacking midfielders, to a lesser extent, are still very good. So in terms of building your midfield, I would go mainly for wingers with a couple of attacking midfielders and try to avoid all defensive midfielders and most normal central midfielders, box-to-box midfielders if you like. Avoid them as well. Next up, going on to your attack, Go for strikers who are worth a little bit of money, but don't feel like you have to spend too much money. There's always some nice bargains in attack, but you can also spend the real bucks on attackers as well. But really cheap strikers don't usually pay up points, but do keep an eye on them. It's probably right now the least important position. It's the position you have to think about least, the forwards. Choosing good defenders that are a low price is really useful, and buying the correct wingers and attacking midfielders is more important. So, yeah, don't spend too much time looking at strikers. Just ones that will score you goals is basically all you need. And then, when we're going on to the bench, what we want to do is not waste money on players that can't get you points because they're sat on your bench. So a lot of people will spend a lot of their money on the bench thinking, oh well, if I put sort of Dele Alli on my bench, then every other game I can bring Dele Alli on. But what you're doing is that every other game where you're not playing Dele Alli, you're wasting all of this money that could be invested into your main team, and it's just sitting there on the bench. And overall, over the course of the season, it's never worth it. So you're better off just to invest in good players that you think will perform week in, week out, and keep them all on your pitch, and maybe have one rotating player on your bench at maximum, and the other guys really should be there to either just be a placeholder and never play a single minute for your team, or they're the kind of players who are super cheap and can pick up maybe 1 or 2 points a game just to cover you, just in case one of your main players doesn't play. This substitute can come on and score you just a 1 or 2 points. That's all you really need. So don't spend too much money on your bench. And then you'd also don't want to spend too much money on the sub goalkeeper. So your sub goalkeeper, I personally don't like to spend any money on a sub goalkeeper. I pick one goalkeeper I like to start, and I pick my other goalkeeper to be the bottom price, so a 4 million goalkeeper, 4 million priced goalkeeper that is, and just leave them on the bench. Forget they even exist. They don't go anywhere near your team, and that's another great way of saving money and allowing you to spend more money on your pitch as well, on the starting 11, because those are the guys who are most important. And then going on to your captain, when you're choosing your captain, it's actually one of the easiest things to do in the world, choosing your captain, even though it's arguably the most important thing you can do. So avoid captaining players who are worth less than 9 million. As a blanket rule, we don't want to think about this too much, just don't even bother captaining anyone worth less than 9 million. Players worth 8.5 million, maybe occasionally, but realistically, what you should be doing is have maybe 2 or 3 really expensive players in your team. Say you've got, for example, Salah, De Bruyne, and maybe Aubameyang. Maybe you've got all 3 of those guys in your team, or someone of that rough value in your team at all times, and then look at those three real premium, real expensive players at each game week, and look and say, which one of you 3 has the best fixture? Which one of you is playing an easy team like a Fulham, West Brom, something like that? And when your player is playing an easy team, you put the captaincy armband on them, and you put the vice captain on the second best fixture out of those really expensive players. So just switch it between the expensive guys. It's really easy to do. You don't really need to overthink it. A lot of people overthink their captain choices and start going on random defenders and like a 7 million midfielder who they think might have a great score that week. Generally speaking, it's not worth it. Just stick it on. Even if you stick it on one player, maybe you'll stick it on Salah for the whole season, you will get more points than you will if you start rotating it between defenders and mid-price midfielders. So it's not worth doing that at all. So stick with the expensive guys and always pick the guy who has the easiest fixture on paper. So you've got your team, you're ready to go. What are we doing with our transfers? What are we doing for the next game week? How do we plan for our next game week? So there's basically lots of don'ts in transfers. So things, and again, this is really blanket. This is really basic rules to follow to make it easy to not have to think about FPL too much. So don't waste transfers on players who are on the bench. If a player is on your bench anyway, why would you bother swapping them? It's pointless. It's not like you've brought them in to get you points. You brought them in to give you no new points. It seems pointless. Don't worry. Just if you don't like a player and he's on your bench, just leave him on the bench. Don't worry about him. Prioritise using your transfers in other areas. Another thing, don't waste transfers on goalkeepers. Say you've got a Leno in goal. Leno's playing week in, week out, but you think, actually, Leno's got a game against Manchester City next. I think I might swap him for Ramsdale at Sheffield United, who's got a nice game against West Brom. Fine, for that 1 week, Ramsdale might score a few more points than Leno. Maybe. I mean, there's no even guarantees in that. It's sort of, Leno's probably going to get a load of save points in his games against Manchester City, so he could actually match Ramsdale for points in this example. But even if Ramsdale gets a few more points, the next game, you might think, oh, actually, I wish I made a transfer on a different area of my pitch. I could have really used that transfer on somewhere else. And more often than not, the transfers on the goalkeepers are just not worth it, because all goalkeepers score so similarly over the course of the season. It doesn't really make sense to rotate them. So just stick with one and don't make any transfers on your goalkeeper until either if they got a red card, they're out for 5 games or whatever, they've got an injury, fair enough, make the transfer. But just save the goalkeeper transfer to your first wildcard. Next up, don't waste transfers on cheap player moves. So say you've got a player who's worth about 6 million and you want to swap him for another player who's worth 6 million. That's very rarely going to come off. There's very rare circumstances where a 6 million player is worth making a transfer on. So I've said a lot of things what you shouldn't do, but what you really should be doing is making transfers on players who you think are going to score loads of points. The real impact players. That's the kind of player you want to be using your transfers on, whether that's sort of in midfield or attack. Defenders, cheap defenders, don't waste your transfer on. Go for your your more premium players. So, for example, if you've got Salah in your team right now, and you can see that Aubameyang, he's got a game this week against, I'm going to use Fulham as an example again. I'm sorry if you're a Fulham fan, because I feel like I'm picking on you a little bit. But say you've got Salah, and you can see Aubameyang. I haven't got Aubameyang in my team, but he's about to play Fulham. I quite like Aubameyang for this week, and I'd like to captain him as well. That's a fantastic transfer to make. And the kind of transfer I've made a couple of times where it's really, really paid off. So these are the transfers you want to make. Expensive players, impact players, and don't waste transfers on players who are sort of not really going to get you many points anyway. Don't worry about that. It's not worth it. Unless you've got free transfers laying around and you really have no idea, you love your team and you've got nowhere else to spend the transfer on, either just save the transfer, or if you can't save the transfer, just use it then, fine. But primarily, impact players, those explosive players, those are the guys we want to be putting our transfers on. And finally, we'll go over chips a little bit, because I know in basic terms, when we're talking about beginners, it's quite complicated using chips in a really effective way. But you can follow some blanket rules that will always be better than if you don't follow them. So save your wild card for as long as possible. Don't get pressured into using your wild card. Say all of your friends in your mini league have started using their wild card. That doesn't mean you have to. Try and save it for as long as possible, because later down the line that could be really useful, and it sort of extends your season, your power and control over your season for longer by saving your wild card. So unless you are in a really, really sticky situation where everything's gone wrong in your team, you completely hate your team, fair enough. Do a wild card, especially if you've got loads of ideas. But sort of if you just want to rejig your bench or swap a couple of players out, don't use your wild card for that. It's not worth it. Just keep onto it, hold on to it for as long as possible, and really treat it like it's really precious, because a wild card is precious in this game. Right, next up, all your other chips, so your free hit, your bench boost, and your triple captain. A lot of people are very keen to just use them. They're exciting to use. You really wonder, how am I going to score with these chips? But you really just want to save them all to the second half of the season, because in the second half of the season we have these things, and a lot of you will know, but we have these things called double game weeks, where one team in particular, or a couple of teams in particular, on any given game week will actually play twice in 1 week. So imagine you've got your triple captain and you want to stick it on Salah against Newcastle, but in a few months' time, in the second half of the season, Salah might be playing sort of Everton and West Brom in the same week, 2 games in 1 week. And that is a far better time to use your triple captain on Salah, when he's playing 2 teams, double the points essentially, isn't it really? So that can be really, really useful and really, really boost your rank and give you such an advantage over your opponents. You might see all the other players in your mini league using their chips, and they might go a little bit ahead of you. But when you save your chips for later down the line, and you're using them on these double game weeks, you're going to race above all of your opponents who have already just wasted their chips early on in the season. This is the best way to use them effectively. Using chips even more effectively can get a little bit complicated, and I will make another video on the more complicated strategies that you can use your chips on. But for now, this is the beginner's guide, and that's sort of what I would say to that. So Just use these rules and you will do really well. You will see a massive improvement to your rank. You can really push not just the top half of the overall rankings, sort of the top few percentile you can actually finish just by following these very, very basic rules. It really is that simple. If you want to go to the top level, it gets a little bit more complicated, but it really is this easy to succeed. So if you did enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up if you found anything in here helpful, if anything made you think. If you have any questions at all, please put them in the comments. I'll try and answer your questions to the best of my ability. Please do subscribe if you want more fantasy tips. You're looking to boost your ranking even more. You want to go to the real top echelons of the overall fantasy table. If you want to win your mini league, perhaps your school or your workplace has organised a mini league and you want to beat all of your mates, your colleagues, whatever, I'm going to try my best to help you to do that. So please do stick around, please do subscribe, please do turn on notifications, and yes, we'll absolutely smash that. Other than that, if you want to get involved with my Twitter, Instagram, support me on Patreon, join my mini league. There's loads of people in this mini league now. All of the links are in the description. There's loads of stuff in the description for you to get involved in. So please do check that out. But aside from that, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later, mates. Bye-bye.